Joining us. We are now recording. So this is the March installment of From the Field. From the Field are monthly member-led events where members share best practices and tips and tricks from the wide range of nonprofit news experiences that they have. Today, we are excited about our topic, which is connecting with communities of color. We expect a really large group for this turnout, so just a friendly reminder to keep muted. And if you have a concept for a member-led From the Field event that you'd like to share with the INN membership, please let me know. I am at Michelle, that's MICHELLE at INN.org. The From the Field events are also part of our effort to help members connect with one another. And we have a series of peer communities that exist on Slack. I just encourage you all to sign up for those peer communities. I will drop a link in the chat in a moment. And if you don't see a topic that appeals to your special interest, just let me know and we're happy to help you start a group. It's all about connecting with the membership. So with that, I will pass the baton to Emily Roseman, who is INN's Research Director and Editor. Take it away, Emily, and thanks everyone.
Hey all, it's so good to see so many of your faces. As Michelle said, my name is Emily. I'm the Research Director here at INN, and many thanks to Michelle and the membership team for allowing us to come to this From the Field event. This all came to be because many of our members wrote up a short question and answer series on how their outlets have been connecting with and serving communities of color over the past year or so. And we just got so much excellent feedback on the series. Neiman Lab co-published many of them. And we heard from many members that you were all super interested in this work and kind of learning more about what this work looks like in practice. And so I am thrilled to have Ron Smith here with us today to moderate this session. Ron is the editor of the Milwaukee Neighborhood News Service, and he is also a board member here at INN. So before I pass it to Ron, I will just say this session is being recorded. And also Michelle mentioned this, but please keep yourself muted and drop in any of your questions in the chat box throughout this event. And we will try to get to your questions in the last 10 or 15 minutes of this event. So thank you again for joining. And without further ado, Ron, take it away.
Thank you so much, Emily, and thank you, INN, for giving us this opportunity to talk about something that's important. I know that all the panelists would agree that serving intentionally communities of color is what we're all about. And so I guess I would start with the preset that no one has a monopoly on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we're here to collaborate, we're here to learn, we're here to empower, and hopefully we're here to inspire. So I'll start off with who we are at Milwaukee Neighborhood News Service, and then I will turn it over to the panelists to kind of talk a little bit about what they do in their organization. So the Milwaukee Neighborhood News Service has been around for 11 years. We cover communities of color in Milwaukee, primarily Black and Latinx. And our credo is that we do professional evidence-based journalism. And so we try to fill information needs of, I would say, an audience that has been neglected and misrepresented for many years in Milwaukee. And our editorial strategy kind of revolves around three tenets. One is celebration, celebrating ordinary people who do extraordinary things in our community. The second is education, connecting our readers to resources that they may not know about. So for example, if we're doing a story about the eviction crisis in Milwaukee, we're not just going to point out the problem, we're going to give them, here are places where you can go to, hey, not get evicted. Here's where you can go to get legal assistance. And the last tenet that we like to practice is illumination. So taking good watchdog reporting and going to the city council meeting, showing up in the community and writing stories that matter for people who matter. So with that, I'd like to take it on panelists who wants to be the first to introduce themselves. I'd say, Angilee, why don't you start?
Thank you. I'm so pleased to be here with such an amazing group. My name is Angilee Shah. I'm the editor-in-chief of Charlottesville Tomorrow. We are in Central Virginia, and we serve sort of the greater Charlottesville area. So Charlottesville, the city and surrounding counties, more and more surrounding counties. That's sort of a stretch for us as we grow, definitely. I think, you know, a lot of people have heard of Charlottesville, or this like pretty small place, for various reasons. We do a lot of work to sort of own our own narratives in this town. That's become sort of hashtag Charlottesville for a lot of people. And we are doing a lot of work to serve the diverse members of our community who have often been left out of our news ecosystem. So I'm really excited about the sort of mission-oriented work that we do.
Great, thank you. Vandana, you want to start?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Vandana Kumar, and I publish India Currents magazine. We started in 1987 as a print magazine, and we've always been very community driven. We've been community focused. And in 2019, we pivoted to a digital nonprofit model. I think while we had always functioned like a nonprofit, you know, we'd never really actually gone that route. And those of us that have studied the media landscape, we've all seen the changes that have affected the entire industry. And for us, you know, we realized that we wanted to continue to tell the stories of the Indian American community, the wider South Asian community here in the Silicon Valley. And we felt it was really important that our voices still continue to be heard. And the medium was not important. The stories were important. And I think we also realized that there is a single narrative that's prevalent about the Indian American community. And we realized, being deeply embedded within this community, that just like anyone else, there's all kinds of people, there are all kinds of works, there's, you know, we cannot fall into the trap of this model minority that we have to represent and enforce in our storytelling. So that's what drives us to continue to tell these stories. And I'm looking forward to hearing from the rest of you and get a chance to share what each one of us is doing. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you. I'm sorry I butchered your name too, so I apologize.
Okay.
Next up, Irene.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. My name is Irene and I am one of the co-founders of Cicero Independiente. Now, we started publishing as a volunteer organization in 2019 to serve the community of Cicero and Berwyn, Illinois, which are two suburbs outside of the city of Chicago, where over 80% of the population is Latinx, immigrant, and Spanish speaking. Now we have, I'm happy to share that we have 2 full-time staff now, and it's really been a journey for us. And I think a lot of what Ron, you said is some of the journalism that we do, right? Like 2020, we saw a big need for everything that we publish is bilingual, but in 2020, we saw a big need for connecting people to resources, giving updates about COVID in Spanish. And that's kind of like where we started picking up and doing a lot more like of that service-based journalism. And then 2021, we've done more investigations and again, like trying to equip and shed light on the injustices that our community is facing. But I think what's been important to us too is the work that we're doing to make sure that we're bringing in more people to do the reporting, especially people who may come from a background like myself, who like I didn't start off in journalism, right? But I want to see more people like me and create more paid opportunities for young people and older people, monolingual Spanish speakers to be involved in this reporting. So yeah, I'm very proud of that. But thank you for having me on here.
And you should be very proud. And I apologize for butchering your name. I'm doing a really good job. Maybe broadcasting is not the field for me,
No.
but I always believe in transparency. When we make mistakes, we own them. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And last but not least, Keri.
Hi, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here in this room of people who I learn from constantly. So looking forward to it again today. I'm Keri Mitchell. I'm the founder of Dallas Free Press. We're in Dallas, Texas. We might be the youngest one here. We've only been around 2 years. Started in 2020. Great timing. And I've always been a community journalist, and now we do community journalism in historically redlined neighborhoods in Dallas. The goal is really to center voices of the neighborhood and let them drive the reporting and the journalistic work that we do. And then we also work with other local media collaboratively to explore solutions to those systemic issues. Ron, I might steal your 3 words. Those were so good, so apt. So anyway, thanks so much for having me.
Well, thank you. I think we're just going to plunge right in the same order that I called and talk a little bit about how we fill the information needs and voids in our communities. One thing that I am so impressed with this group is that we're small and mighty. And so that I really believe that if we can do some of these things, everyone can do it, right? It takes work, let's not forget that. But I think we're all for examples of newsrooms that are small and mighty and have different approaches, but we have decided to center our newsroom efforts on serving communities of color. So with that, let's just start off talking about, if you haven't given the scope of your newsroom, please do, and talk about how you fill the information void and the people who do it.
I think I'm first. Is that
Yep.
right, Ron? Okay.
Yep.
So Charlottesville Tomorrow is a really amazing organization. It has several years of community engagement and trust. The turning point for this organization, I think, was 2017. And our executive director, Giles Morris, is in this group when he took the helm. And really changed the organization's makeup quite a bit. And the board, we have a lot of newer board members that really changed the core of the organization. I joined as editor-in-chief on December 1, so I'm relatively new. I was on the board for 2 years, and then loved the organization so much that I took the job when it opened. The way that we think about information needs is sort of in soft ways and more strategic, surveys and more deliberate sort of metrics ways. Giles really did a lot of the legwork on building a partnership called Charlottesville Inclusive Media. So we think about ourselves as part of this ecosystem of media in Charlottesville that has not historically well represented people of color. So we partner with Vinegar Hill Magazine and In My Humble Opinion, which is a radio program, Sunday radio talk show on our local nonprofit hip hop station. May every city in America have a local nonprofit hip hop station. It's a great joy of living in Charlottesville. We partner with them to help lead, where our media ecosystem should move, not just our organization, not just their organization, but leadership for what is frankly a media-rich town in a lot of ways. We're a university town. It's really an interesting thing to have a lot of media in town, but not much inclusion. Not an economy that supports a variety of people to participate. And so what our partnership is seeking to do is really build up capacity for organizations that can support the kind of work that will serve communities of color and frankly the whole of our metro area, because the distinction between serving communities of color and white communities, both communities need information about each other, and that's what's lacking in Charlottesville often. So just on the information needs, I'll make this a little quick and I can answer questions, but before I took the job at Charlottesville Tomorrow, I worked in public media, and I also worked with an organization called Listening Post Collective, which is a really amazing group of people that have designed really intentional community-focused ways of understanding information needs. So I took some of that experience and worked with the organization before I started as editor-in-chief to design audience survey. So we did our first, I believe what is our first audience survey with our partners, with this magazine and broadcast program last year. So we intend to repeat that, really focusing on questions that are actionable for us, things we can change, sometimes at very deep levels about what we're doing, depending on what we learn. And that audience survey was both heartening and enlightening for us, and something that we can use to benchmark and make sure that we're on track. The other thing that I do and have done when I got into this role as editor-in-chief is just take a listening tour of the community. I take, when I first started, 3 to 5 meetings a day with community members, and now it's about 3 to 5 a week. Just listening to talk about what people want and need from their local media, so that as we're growing, we're really planning a lot in going forward, that we're doing it in a way that's serving our community. And I take a lot of notes, and I have spreadsheets. The other thing we do is just catalog the feedback that we get, so we have some record of it. You know, small markets, you know, people come work for the organization, they move on. We want to make sure we have some continuity regardless of who's in the newsroom. And then the last thing our board is actually, this amazing community-based board is working on, is a larger ecosystem assessment for our area to better understand needs broadly. And that's sort of a long-term project. We're not 100% sure how it gets completed, but it's something that's in the works, and we're really lucky to have community leadership on that.
Thank you. You're next.
Yeah. You know, I have learned a lot of stuff on the job. Just a little segue to say that, you know, India Current started as a labor of love, because I couldn't find myself and people like me reflected in the media. And I know I'm dating myself. This is like the pre-internet era, before, you know, a lot of people even knew how to find each other. Today, the world is a very different place. Nevertheless, you know, we are based in the Silicon Valley. So in the language of the Silicon Valley, the medium, I've said this before, the medium doesn't matter. You know, what we have is the ability to tell stories. For us, we also started telling stories by sourcing stories from the community. And it was an actual need, because we didn't have the money to actually have people in-house write stories. So we just asked, you know, it's going to be free. Let's ask people to just send in their stories. And today we have a term for it, right? We call it crowdsourcing. But we were crowdsourcing before there was actually a term for it. So that's the source of our stories, even 35 years later. And I'm really happy to be here on this panel today at INN, because we are celebrating our 35th anniversary in April of this year. And so how does something like this even happen? 2 ways. One is we are deeply connected with the community that we serve. We have such deep roots. You know, what people I don't know, I know someone who knows someone, you know, it's familial. And that happens with a lot of immigrant communities. Oftentimes when we talk about media and the role that media plays, you know, it's about holding truth to power, you know, holding them accountable, holding people in power accountable. But I think ethnic media plays another very vital role, which is showcasing the community, telling about documenting the intimate lives of the community. And when people see themselves reflected in the media, it is incredibly powerful. It shows you belong, you know, and that is such a powerful feeling. It drives us. And I think Ron said earlier that we are like, you know, the little engine. I say this all the time. We are like the little engine that could. We have a small group of people, but who feel so passionately that our voices and our stories must be heard, and that we belong. And we have continued this community storytelling model, you know, while we started out showcasing events that may be as a utility. We started out as a utility, showcasing events that are happening in the area. But today we are so much more, and our mission, we become more mission driven. The idea of creating storytellers of color, every year we work with dozens and dozens and dozens of people who many of them have never told a story, never found a platform where they could share and their voices valued. But we are doing that, and we become intentional about that. I can go on, Ron, but I think let's hear from the other people too.
I'm a little bit of Baptist. I'm ready to raise my hand and shout. So thank you. Great job.
Thank you. I think it's my turn. So similar to what Vandana said, we started Cicero Independiente also out of love. Like we grew up here, and we were tired of seeing how often people, especially Spanish speakers who may not speak English, were excluded from decision-making spaces, and how little information of what like happens in our local government or in public meetings actually makes it outside of there. And here, you know, at least in Chicago, right? Like people are getting displaced from Chicago and they're moving to the suburbs, like Cicero and Berwyn. Cicero and Berwyn have seen an increase in the population of like people of color, and yet, like for us, it seemed like you know, the institutions that are here have either chosen not to like upgrade and like make it possible for more people to become involved in those spaces, or they're intentionally choosing not to, right? So that's kind of like the drive that like was behind us creating Cicero Independiente. And in terms of like information needs, like even before we launched, we decided to like figure out because we had our own ideas and conceptions about like what people would need, right? Like me, for example, thinking it's a majority Latinx town, I thought, well, people want to know about immigration. People want to know where raids are happening or where they've seen ICE field officers. So, you know, we decided to go to a local coffee shop. We put out flyers inviting people to like talk to us, and hello, like, no, like immigration was actually not like one of the first topics that came up in those conversations. So those conversations kind of cemented that like basis for us to like always try to reach out to people and talk to people and find out exactly what it is that they need. And tap into existing networks and information hubs, right? Because even though like Cicero had no local like independent paper, that doesn't mean that information isn't like being spread by like the residents and the people who live here, right? There's already in every community, there's information hubs. There's like networks of people who are sharing information, even if it's just, you know, somebody who may have gone to an appointment at a service agency, learned about something, and they're spreading the information to others. So like once we launched Cicero Independiente, that was another part of it for us, right? Making time and being intentional, making time and spending the resources to like do the legwork, even though it's slow and it may be hard to like, you know, go to the laundromat, talk to people who are there, go to the bus stop before they go to work, before people go to work, because there's like people waiting, and like talk to people there to find out more about like what they want to see, what they need, and to also, you know, give them a postcard or something with our name on it and our social media handles so they know how to reach us, how to find us. So that's been some of the like work that we've been doing. And shout out also Angilee to the Listening Post Collective, because it was their resources that we actually used and tailored in the beginning to begin doing some of these interviews and like, you know, talk about mapping information needs here in the community. And most recently too, last year, we, through the listening lab, which is separate, both of them listening things, but through the listening lab, we like had very formal interviews with people too, like hour-long interviews with people to like, again, like kind of update our knowledge base, at least what we're going on, and reach more people. And this time around, we focused on people between ages 25 to 40, because at least we've seen how much more engaged in our work they are. And we really wanted to learn more about their information needs and like their ideas, and like spending that time and those resources. Yes, it's a lot, but it's been so enlightening and so helpful for us to like even find more people who want to support our work, who want to get involved. And like we just had a test run advisory committee meeting with some of them, and like they're on board to like be a part of it. Now we just got to figure out how to do it and what that will actually like look like. But it's yeah, they've at least offered us so many more insights that we didn't know that were, you know, needs that specific community members may have, or like networks of people that they can reach out to. So Yeah, and that has been virtual because of the pandemic, right? But we're gonna step up to doing more of our in-person outreach again.
I'm just amazed at just the wisdom in the room and the talent. I'm exhausted just listening to you guys and also motivated. In terms of my organization, it's a little weird how we started. We actually started from Joseph Zilber. He was a prominent philanthropist in Milwaukee, and he was a real estate agent, and he wanted to kind of leave a legacy of connecting the central city to the rest of the community. Milwaukee has one of the highest segregation rates in the country. And some people have referred to it as the Selma of the North. So on the north side is primarily Black, on the south side is Latinx. And there are other minority groups, but those are the two biggest. And the Zilber, through the family foundation, his foundation, they commissioned a survey just to see what information needs different communities needed. And they discovered that a lot of our African-American and Latinx populations were not they didn't feel they were being served by the media that existed. And I would say Milwaukee actually is very media rich. We have a wonderful regional newspaper, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, that wins Pulitzers and does tremendous watchdog reporting. We have a lot of local websites and things like that. Out of this, though, NNS was formed to kind of change the conversation, right? Looking at how a lot of journalism from the legacy outlets are built on conflict. And we decided to build NNS on representation, people seeing themselves. It's so important. Like you said, Vandana, it's important because remember what happens when you don't see yourself. Then you're left to the narrative of others. So NNS started, and it was housed in a community hub with other nonprofits. And then several years later, Marquette University said, hey, you guys want some space? Want some free rent? And we're like, yeah, we do. So we are actually housed in the College of Communication at Marquette, editorially independent. Marquette gives us tremendous in-kind support. It pays my salary, the salary of the rest of the team, and we have 6 part-time reporters and editors, comes through foundation grants and things like that. So over the years, we've kind of honed in our philosophy in terms of what we cover, and we've kind of focused on, I always tell the team, I came in 2019 from USA Today, where I was the managing editor. But before that, I was the deputy managing editor at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. And I was always a fan of NNS because I thought it gave the community voices that you just didn't hear about or from. So we decided, and I think everyone has to make these decisions. What you cover means what you won't cover. And so we decided that we wanted to cover housing, health, public safety. And that became our these are the things we do in addition to what we call the NNS spotlights, which are the ordinary people who do extraordinary things. It could be the choir director at the Baptist church who's also on the school board. It could be the woman who baked cookies during COVID just to uplift her neighbors. And they said, oh, great, these cookies are great. You should go into business. And she did. So we tell those type of stories. And one of the things that we've learned is the power of collaboration. So our stuff is published on our website, through our social media, but we partner with other news agencies, news groups. So it's not uncommon for the Journal-Sentinel to rerun our stuff. It's not uncommon for Spectrum TV to rerun our stuff, to TV stations, to local websites. So our work is republished and recirculated in other media as well. And so we do this to amplify our reach and to connect our audiences. But one of the things I was thinking about with COVID is that we collaborated with the Wisconsin Center for Investigative Journalism on a text-based messaging news service that we call News 414. And we worked together on that. And I always say, people say, why would you do that? We don't want to compete, we complete each other. And you can never assume that you know what your readers want to talk about, because we thought when we started News 414, people were going to just want to talk about COVID. They didn't want to talk about COVID. You know what they wanted to talk about? They wanted to talk about food insecurity and housing and mental health. And so we changed our approach to covering stories to become more resource oriented, to give people, here's information on where you can get tested. Here's information on where you can get free food. And we do that intentionally by listening, just what you guys are doing. But it really kind of changed how we approached our stories. We still do the journalism with a capital J. However, some people are criticizing me and saying, oh, you do too many resource stories. I don't think we do enough resource stories. This is what our readers need to know. They don't need to know, they already know that Milwaukee can be challenging to navigate. What they don't maybe know is here are 5 nonprofit agencies that can help you. And so we really feel that we're here to serve the readers, and we do that in other ways. For example, during 2020, when we know that our audience, graduation may be the one time they can get to celebrate, that high school graduation. Maybe everyone doesn't go to college. And so we made sure, because the graduation ceremonies were closed, we made sure that we took pictures of our audience in their graduation uniforms and shared that with them. So they know that we are there. I always tell people that we are the A team and the B team. We're the A team because we're always going to be there, the B team because we're going to be there when everyone else leaves. And I feel like that's what my panelists would agree with too. So I want to move on to talk a little bit about distribution. How do you get the information out? And we'll just start in that same order.
Angilee, I don't know if you are
Yeah.
okay with me starting.
Yeah, please, Keri. I
No,
think you were going to answer the question what neat information means.
No, I can combine it really easily though. So I was thinking about distribution and how we get news to people. So the backstory of Dallas Free Press is I've worked in Dallas for more than 15 years now doing community journalism, but the business model, as those of you who are in journalism know, we were only able to cover neighborhoods where advertisers were interested in eyeballs. And so I was getting frustrated with the resources available to do civic journalism. And I was frustrated with, not being able to go into certain communities and do important stories. So that was kind of the impetus, but really it was more of a civic journalism thing until there was a story I did right before leaving the magazine that I was at about, there's a high school in town and it's a very, very prominent arts magnet that's supposed to be for Dallas school children. And it was a worst kept secret that lots of kids outside of Dallas who had a lot more privilege were getting in. And so we did this story and I got a phone call out of the blue from a guy named Raul Reyes, who happens to be on this call. And he said, hey, let's meet. I'm from West Dallas. And so we all sat down and he said, this is a story about racial equity. No one's covering this well in our community. Can you help us? And at the time I couldn't, and I didn't know what to do, but it became really crystal clear through that if we're going to cover, as Ron, you were talking about, some of these really, big stories, we have to center it. We have to center the voices of people who live in the communities who are most impacted by these issues. So West Dallas very graciously basically invited us into their community to do journalism. So that's how this started for us. And when we started kind of brainstorming, how do we do this? Raul and that same group of West Dallas folks said, if you try to do this with email, you're going to fail. Our people don't read email. And if you try to do this in just English, you're going to fail. We need Spanish too. And so I didn't do surveying to figure that out. I just listened to them and they were right. And so we had a text message service. We launched it in mid 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, before we ever had a website, because the text message service was actually more important and more crucial at the time for the same kinds of resources that you were talking about, Ron, to get to people. So we would send out COVID numbers, but also testing sites and also, not vaccination, that was later on, but those kinds of things. And we use the text as a way to not just communicate masses of people, but so they can text us one-on-one. And what I really started loving is after a while, we started getting just text messages back that said, thank you. How often do journalists get thanked? We usually get, completely, ugh. And then we would get people who out of the blue would just have a question, nothing related to a story we had done or even something we had texted out, but they knew that we had access to the resources they needed. So they would just reach out and ask. And for us, we get a lot of information from those texts, but we also, I can't emphasize enough the importance of showing up and listening. I mean, if that's all we did, or if that was 75% of our job, I'm not even sure that's enough, quite honestly. I mean, that's really where all of this comes from is, what do people talking about? What do they need? What do they want? And exactly what you all are saying about, we thought it was going to be stories about X, but actually people wanted to talk about Y. And so we've chosen our topics based on, there's a group called, in West Dallas, at least, there's a group called West Dallas 1, and they have subcommittees on the environment, housing, and education, and now health. That's how our topics are chosen, because that's what's important to that community. And so I just love hearing that echoed in what you all are saying about how you're choosing what you write about and do journalism on. But that's kind of how we do have email. But what really, when people ask me what kind of distribution we do, I say really the primary way we communicate with people is text. And if you don't get our text, you're probably missing half of the reporting that we do.
Excellent.
I can go next. Keri, I'm so fascinated by this texting service that you have implemented. I definitely want to learn more about this from you. We've come from a more traditional journalism background, the printed word, everything, once it's printed, you can't change that. So just so much attention is paid to everything that we send out. And I'm sort of terrified at this idea that you're proposing. It's like, what? We let people just text out to, everyone? How are we going to be held accountable? So it's frightening, but then part of this whole new world, and that everyone, I'm really fascinated to hear from all of you, because I'm learning, every little bits from each one of you. Regarding how we tell our stories, I've had the luxury of time of building an audience, but in some ways we are still running a 3-year-old company, because while the storytelling remains the core of the business, everything else around it has changed. Everything. The business model has changed, the revenue model has changed, the operations of going into one newsroom, and each one of you relates to that. We all used to go to a newsroom, we'd collaborate, talk with each other, regardless of the size of your organization. This was a way that we would interact and choose and decide about our stories. COVID sort of put an end to all of that, and we've all reinvented ourselves, reinvented the way we work together, reinvented the way we tell stories. Not the stories that we tell, but how we go about doing that. And so for us too, it's been a big learning. One of the things that we also want to make sure a large number of my readers are English proficient, at least enough to understand English. However, the value that we provide is a cultural competency. How do you create a cultural lens on any story? Let's take, for example, the census. When the census happened, how do you educate an immigrant community? Because according to the California Immigrant Data Portal, 53% of Indian Americans have been in the United States for 10 years or less. So their culture and their background from where they come from play a big role in how they process information. So our jobs are to explain the value of participating in the census in a way that perhaps nobody else is able to do. Or if we're talking about redistricting, kind of like, oh my God, who cares about redistricting? Is that something that, but why is that relevant for each immigrant community? Or why is it relevant for anyone living in any geographic area? How do you make a story like that relatable to the audience that we serve? And I think that's the biggest value that India Currents is able to deliver, and able to tell, regardless of whatever the subject may be, providing a cultural lens on all of these stories, make it relatable to an audience. And one thing that we all must remember, that public policy is shaped by public opinion. And you have to find ways to engage the public. For us, the cultural lens is a hook that is why people come to read India Currents. And when they come and they read stories that may be relevant to or of interest to them, or that they would not find anywhere else, we also take that moment to push some of this other content, And there is, stories, we're also talking about sourcing, right, earlier. And we said, stories come to us when people feel like they can talk to you. Keri, you mentioned texting. Others have talked about, going out, listening tour. We have listening tours every day, There are the people constantly sending us email, chats, we have that on our box. People, random stuff, people put out, asking simple questions or seeking resources. But I'm very proud of the kinds of stories we tell, because, I'll give one example, which is, when my children were growing up, we would often take them to enrichment classes. They're going out to play basketball, or they're going to take piano lessons or things like that. And there was a family-run grocery store, ethnic grocery store, actually a small restaurant, not grocery store, just down the street, run by an immigrant Indian family. And I would never see their children at any of these events. And one day, during this period, I went down there to pick up some food. And I saw these young kids, behind the counter, helping their parents. And it just gave me that, just sort of eye-opening to notice that we take this for granted. Sometimes the privilege that we have, even of education or other abilities, that everyone does not have the same thing. And so that actually sort of put us on a different path to start looking at, for these stories, children who are actually working in family-run businesses. Doesn't this happen across all cultures? It's not one that's specific to the Indian American community, but all small businesses rely on family members. And what are their lives like? Who documents their stories? During the pandemic, for the ethnic grocery stores were a lifeblood for the South Asian community at large. And perhaps for many people, the grocery stores were a lifeblood. We took it for granted that we could go to a grocery store and buy everything but toilet paper. But, we didn't have to worry about food. We didn't have to worry about getting the right masala or getting okra that we like, or, buying the vegetables, karela, that we like to eat. But who's telling these were actually essential workers? Nobody gave them any visibility. We did a series called Masala Heroes, documenting the role of the ethnic grocery stores in the wellness of a community. And those are the kinds, there are so many different kinds of stories that all of us do. I just wanted to share a couple that, and the direction in which we make sure to tell our stories.
Thank you so much. Just a housekeeping note, if people have questions, please drop them in chat and we will get to them as soon as we can. And then I think for our last two, this is the last question that we had, our last two folks, if we can be succinct, but get some things out.
Yeah.
We're also passionate.
Yeah, I think, building on what Vandana says about, we're building sort of a reporting staff, an organization that listens every day because they're in the community. right? A lot of time when I was covering immigration, we had these really amazing stories from different parts of the country when I was working in public media. And I remember one of my colleagues asked me, how did you get, like we had a story, I think it was about a Bangladeshi taxi driver. I mean, in some ways, a lot of people have done these stories, but it was a really good and really close story. And he was like, how did you get these sources? He's like, you know, because in public media, it's like you talk to your taxi driver. Like that's how you get the South Asian source in New York City, which is like, if you live in these communities, that's not necessary, right? You don't have to just like go out to whoever you can meet. You can actually go places. Like, you know, I think, you know, during the, I'm going to just tell a really quick story, but during the, when the huge rape case happened in Delhi, a lot of local news, there was a lot of reverberations around South Asian communities in, what is this, 2013, 2014, I want to say. And a lot of outlets were going to Queens and they were going to restaurants, which is great. You could also just stand at the door of Goldman Sachs and also talk to Indian immigrants. You know, it's like that perspective. It's like you don't have to rely on sort of the stereotype of where you find people and how what state you find them in if you live in those communities. So, you know, for us at Charlottesville tomorrow, I think a lot of people don't know, Charlottesville was once a majority Black city. Through Jim Crow segregation, through multiple generations of eminent domain, racial covenants, it is now hovering around 14% Black, maybe a little less, depending on how you count it. For us, especially in Charlottesville inclusive media, you know, the city itself and the surrounding areas in our country has done a pretty good job of erasing Black narratives here. Pretty good on its own. We don't want to be part of that. So the thing that we are building, our distribution, I know the question was about distribution. We actually have a really strong email list. We also distribute stories with our partners. So broadcast radio show is really important. Vinegar Hill Magazine used to have a print run that they do now occasionally too, and reaches a different audience as well. You know, what we're building with the partnership is the story portal to pay people for the work and begin that like hard work of mitigating the erasure of people's stories here in the South, here in Charlottesville. And to do that, we really do want to build an economy. I mean, there's so much awesome volunteer work or very underpaid work actually happening here. There's some programs that do really great work, that give people careers as well, but we want to be part of that part where in our economy, actually, this is extremely valuable. These perspectives are valuable. So we're building, basically, it's pretty straightforward. We're building a story portal with our partners to just bring in more work and create a workflow and a budget where we pay people to just change, you know, who owns these narratives? Because we need people who are close to issues, not visiting, but are in the issues that we're covering. So that's part of our work as well. Because I think, you know, part of the issue with distribution, some of it's medium, a lot of it is, you know, as everybody has said, just what perspective you cover things from. Is it going to be worth the time of the people you're writing about or the people who are, you know, you really want to benefit from the work?
Thank you. And last but not least.
Hi. So for us, I guess one thing that I think is important to share is just, and this is similar to what Vandana said, right? Like even within a majority Latinx community, we are not a monolith. And our age, our generation, our immigration status, all of this impacts the kind of news that we need and the ways that we like access it and access information and want to access it, right? So we use social media, right, to reach certain groups of people, younger audiences. But one thing that's been important for us is like developing print products. And maybe this is like, sometimes I feel weird about like saying that we're returning to like the newspaper, but also like it's not, because a lot of our community, right, like still don't have equitable access to the internet, or like don't know how to use their phones to access us on Facebook or like access us online. So that's why it's so important for us to like be able to have something that's in print to be able to give to people so that they like have access to the information that we're producing. And that has looked like a, you know, an actual like newspaper that we distribute, not weekly because we don't have the capacity for that, but more like quarterly. But also we've like printed out flyers and distributed that, or posters with Know Your Rights information. And I think that somebody had a question about how you can like build trust or like not seem like you're trying to take advantage of people. I think like that's part of the answer, right? Like trying to build relationships with people so that you like understand like both what they need and how they need to access things, and like just start building those relationships, that trust right from the beginning, even before, like Keri, even before you even have a website, right? Like that work needs to happen before you know, you even have something to distribute, and just be like transparent about why you're trying to make those relationships, or like, you know, let them know, ask them what they think about your future plans, or like what you're planning to launch. Because yeah, all of that is important to build relationships where people will then want to help you out, or will trust you enough to send you stories, or like to connect you with people who might want to, you know, share what has happened to them. But yeah, that was my short tidbit.
Great. And we'll turn it over to Emily for some of the questions and answers. But before that, I think the only thing I would add is that it's just important to be transparent with your readers. It is a relationship, letting them know how you succeed, what things you need help on, and communicating that throughout the journey is so important, and being responsive when they challenge you. For example, we had a thing called, we do a monthly where you can get food. And I think the first headline was where you can get food where needy people can get food, or something like that. And one of our friends said, hey, they don't necessarily see themselves as needy, take that out. And it was just something like, so we took it out. What was the big deal? And found out the engagement was it was stronger. So it's listening. We don't have all the answers. We're asking questions and we're connecting, but being transparent through every step is so important in keeping. It's not just about building a relationship, it's keeping that relationship. So Emily, you want to take over here now with some of the questions?
Thank you all so much. This is such an important and fascinating conversation, and it's so clear hearing from you all speak that we need to have more events like this, and we need to talk about this more all together. I'm going to post in chat a link to all of the written Q&As with all of these incredible folks. So if we don't get to your question, odds are it might be addressed in one of these Q&As. Also, I just want to flag, I understand if some of you on the panel or in the room might have to hop in the next few minutes, since I know we're pushing up against the end of our time together. But for those of you who do want to hang on for a few minutes after the 30 after mark, that would be great. So Giles from Charlottesville tomorrow actually has a great question in the chat. He asks, and this is a question to any of you on the panel, do the revenue and the distribution ecosystems we exist in support this work of connecting with and serving communities of color, or inhibit it? And I'm gonna, I thought that connected nicely, Vandana, with your conversation with Amy in the chat about funder connections. I cede the floor.
I guess I'll start. Yes and no. I'm sorry.
I was trying to see, where was Giles' question? Oh, here it is.
Oh yeah, it's posted in the chat. Yeah, I'll post it again here.
For us, since we rely sometimes almost too much on philanthropic help, I think sometimes the philanthropic community rewards or organizations that don't look like us. I'll just be honest, So we were getting funds for a couple of years from one grantee, and all of a sudden we didn't get it. And not that we have a right to get it, but when I asked why, they said, "Oh, you guys are becoming too militant." they didn't like the voices. So they said, oh, we want these voices, but when we gave these voices of community leaders, it upset some people. So for us, it's about diversifying that revenue, right? I mean, we don't have a lot of revenue. We don't really exist to make a profit. We just want to exist to get the news out. And so we're working on plans for membership. We know, for example, the last 2 months of the year, we raised, I would say, $70,000 without a lot of effort. So I think that is something there, but we'll actually be hiring our first business person to kind of deal with that. It's a capacity infrastructure issue for us, and I'm sure for many, many of us.
Thank you, Ron.
Oh, and
Sorry.
can I ask a follow-up? Keri put a really interesting comment as well that, she's really interested in organizations that spend time developing relationships rather than churning out content. And, this is something we struggle with a lot too, because all of our listening, all of our community surveys say people want context and depth, and they want more information that's useful for them. And, it takes time to do that kind of work, and we can't necessarily have as much content as an organization that's doing, quick turn stories based on council meetings or based on, events or nonprofit press releases, which is a lot of what happens here. There's some good stories that happen, but, focusing, it's difficult. We're in an ecosystem that rewards more content, the way tech companies work, the way search works, the way so many things work. So I'm wondering, Keri, how you deal with that too.
I was hoping you guys could answer that question, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The traditional journalism business model doesn't work for us. It's one of the reasons we're nonprofits, right? And then nonprofits don't know what to do with us because we're journalism. And so we're kind of in this tough spot right now, trying to figure it out. And I think it's just going to take some more time and effort to prove it up, but it's painful in the interim. I know that's true for a lot of you too.
So, for us, advertising revenue was what kept us going for 30 years. And, but that has dwindled. And I think all of us are aware, it's the new model, the digital economy. There's only so much. I think there was a survey that said 85% of the digital ad revenue goes to Google and Facebook, and the rest, 15%, is for the rest of the world, every other company that's out there. So it's a very small amount. That's a reality. So we have to face that. For us, the challenge was, now, if that model doesn't work, how do we create another model? Now, I've been studying the nonprofit model, which is the reason why we moved there for the couple of years. And there are several issues. There's capacity issue. There's only so much that one can do, or I can do with my time. And then the people that I'm able to bring on board, how much can I ask of them? It's like, you want them to do all of these things, you can't pay. So how is this going to be paid for? Now, bigger nonprofits may have already made their case. They're unable to find support through philanthropic organizations. For us, that's all. It's all a work in progress. We've been fortunate to find a couple of grants, but nothing really big or consistent that would make our business sustainable. So why are we still doing this? Because dang, if we don't, then our stories will not be told. And that's such a driving force that we continue to show up day after day after day to make sure that there is representation. And I really, if there are organizations and people on this call who are coming from the philanthropic world, I urge you, you have to find, just like even what Keri said, it is so vital for our community to actually have the local voices represented, make sure they don't disappear, and make sure that people feel that they're represented. You have to support us. And building a membership model takes time, requires a tech stack, requires capacity. And we haven't built that yet, but 2 years ago, I was trying to figure out, oh my God, how do I afford this? How do I get donation? How do I do all of this? Which is when I spoke with Lance Noble at Berkeley side. And I told him, he said, why don't you ask your readers? And I said, I don't have a way to collect money from them. I don't have any mechanism. He says, get a PayPal or something. And I said, how do I send them thank yous? He said, you'll figure it out. And so that's what I did my first fundraiser on. I sent an email out, an email blast. And so this is for all of you too, that you don't know who values your work. They may not be talking to you every day. And I was really surprised. I sent one email out. I got $8,000. Now, in the grand scheme of things, that's a very small amount, but I got dang $8,000 that I would have slaved and worked hard and talked to 50 business owners in order to be able to get that kind of money. But one email accomplished that. So let's value the work that we produce. And that's going to help. It is a process. And if you're in it for the long run, you will go through that process, But I really do say that, believe in what you do and reach out to the people that are reading you. You'd be surprised how they'd support you.
All right. Thank you all so much to our guests here in the room. And also, can we just do a round of applause for our amazing panelists and moderator? Thank you so much. You guys are awesome. Just a reminder that we have been recording this. So we will post the link on your YouTube channel to share with your colleagues, friends, funders, perhaps. And also, thank you, Irene. If everyone wants to post, or to the panelists, if you guys want to post your email addresses in chat for folks if they want to reach out, ask you follow-up questions, that would be wonderful. Great. All right, thank you all so much for joining us. Keep an eye out for that YouTube link to this recording. And I'll post one more time a link to our Q&A series in the chat if you want to check out the text version of this conversation today. All right, thanks so much all. Have a great day.
Sorry, where's the button?